Economic development in a small rural area can be a challenge. However, I have had a wonderful opportunity in working with a team that includes a dynamic mayor, wonderful city manager, assistant city manager, and the director of tourism. Everybody got together in the beginning of 2018 and said, we need to make a change. We need to do something that shows that we're moving the dial here in La Junta, Colorado.
It's not easy. The skill set needed to make development happen involves architects, financing, construction, and that's one of the weaknesses. It's not a one-stop shop. You just don't go to one person and say, hey, put a whole new housing unit upstairs. You've got to bring the skill sets together to make that happen. The architect is one of the key people on that, but from the owner's standpoint, they got to get the financing and development, and then the construction team that pulls it together, and then you manage it and market it.
One of the big problems of getting started with upper floor loft housing is when you have none of it, you can't measure its market absorption, which is the typical approach to a market study. You propose a project and the appraiser will go out and look at what other product has been on the market, how long it took to sell or rent. Well, when you have none, you can't do it that way. Well, the good news is that with our credit card data and with census data, there are companies around the country now that can actually estimate potential demand, which has been a very useful tool in medium-sized cities. Smaller cities, a little more difficult. So you might have to resort to more guerrilla tactics. Do surveys online, do surveys with focus groups, having tours or promoting really cool vacant spaces in the stories they have as a kind of a come-on to get people to walk through them and enjoy a cocktail or a snack and sell the story.
And in fact, many towns now are doing this on their 15th and 20th year. Every year they have a tour. They do vacant properties as well as restored and rehabilitated properties, and they showcase the living and available opportunities. So you keep the messaging going. The loft tour becomes a fundraiser for the local community organization, and it's a very easy thing to do. And people are really excited to see both the new places that are put, and there's also a kind of an excitement about seeing that abandoned space, what used to be up there, and imagining that.
So the particular building that we're discussing was once kind of a trading company that housed a lot of the supplies that put together what's called the hanging flume, which is this incredible ditch that hangs on the side of a mountain. And so our little building there was the home for all of the materials for that. And then pretty soon there was another story about one of our council women who used to go to the dentist in the upstairs of this building back when she was a little girl. And so these stories kind of wove together this fabric of what we're now turning into something that's a livable place for people within our community.
Some of the key characteristics to consider when evaluating a property is obviously the space available, the windows, the lighting. You know, if you got a corner building with windows on front and side, you got a much more easy opportunity for housing conversion than that 20-foot wide building with 3 windows in the front and a long, deep floor plan. Those are harder to work with. Not impossible, just harder, more range of options. And then what have you got up there? Is it built out with lots of little rooms? Is it one big space? What's the character of it? So there's a lot of things that come into play in evaluating what you've got to work with. But at the end of the day, we're putting in all new systems, bringing it up to date for all of the heating and ventilating and air conditioning. And then we're working with that great space plan, with the tall ceiling, the open plan.
When I had a bar restaurant, I built office for the second floor. And my research into upper floor housing was simply this. Every other person that came to my office wanted to rent it on the spot to live in. I knew that there was a market for the exposed brick, for the tall ceilings, for the hardwood floors.
And we're always emphasizing the installation of new kitchens and bathrooms are probably a signature place where you've got to err on the side of quality. Really make that great new unit for the house, that center part, the kitchen where all that stuff happens and it plays off the great room. This is the lifestyle choice. And that's where you've got to manage it to the best skill you can, but make it look good. You don't want to make it look cheap. You don't want it to make it have a second-rate tier to it. It's got to have that panache when you start, because that's how you're going to generate the excitement about this new lifestyle unit upstairs.
It's a combination of trying to contain your costs, but also trying to create that excitement in the product. That's why those first ones especially err on the side of quality to make sure you can get the most possible rent in your market. Excite more interest from people who have the means to live and pay more for rent.
One of the important things about programming the unit type that we're adding today is the level of amenities. Clearly, the baseline is this good kitchen and bathroom. On top of that, we're adding laundry facilities in the unit. And then depending upon your space and what you've got available, can you get an outdoor terrace space in at the back, a roof deck, something that adds an outdoor amenity space to it, as well as what's on the inside of the building, and then playing off these larger ceilings and extra room or space. So there's space planning sides that can be beneficial. And then on the other side of this is all the upgrades that make it better for health and life safety. One of the technical challenges to the renovation of these is meeting modern building code standards. So one of the first recommendations we make to a community is they assess what building codes are they using. There are new building codes that are called existing building codes. So the International Existing Building Code is the new tool for your community to adopt. Then the code officials got more flexibility to understand how to work with older buildings. So you start with that. You train the code official, and then you have to take on some really critical new issues for safety. How many exits do you need? 3-story buildings require more exits than 2-story buildings. So that's a first issue. Front and back exits. Then the fire separation between the first floor and the second floor. So all these things come into play in the evaluation of what you have to do to put the building back in use, because typically it's been vacant for so long, you are upgrading it with a change of use. And that's going to require all of these new life safety things to come into play. Using new existing building codes, we can find the various ways to improve life safety that are the most cost-effective for the rehabilitation. And that's why we need the skill set of the architect and the code official working together.
In smaller towns, the cost of construction has been steadily increasing. Sometimes the rent rates have stayed pretty static. That creates a gap between what it costs you to build and the income you can get from it once it's complete. And so successful communities have figured out ways to fill that gap.
Our Main Street program is called DART, so it's the Montrose Development and Revitalization Team. We came upon a really great investor. They purchased the building and came to us asking for help from a financial standpoint to really bridge that gap. We put together a really meaningful incentive package from a financial standpoint for them. We partnered with them on parking to ensure that people would have places to park for free downtown and wouldn't be getting parking tickets, all of those type of really, really tiny details that they might not have thought of, but we as the community have experience and we're able to give them the insight on.
There are a number of organizations, National Main Street, state and local development organizations, community development associations, that have perfected tools to help communities overcome the initial financial barriers to solve that cost issue that communities can use creatively to put life back on Main Street.
In Colorado, the combination of the state and federal tax credits now can pay for over half of the rehabilitation expenses on redevelopment projects.
There are resources available at the state and local level to help communities, regardless of size, try to figure out this puzzle of how do you bring this high quality product onto the market, initially at a cost that can't pay for itself, but there's tools to help you get there to build your market that eventually rents will catch up with the quality of space.
We applied to Urban Renewal. They awarded us $200,000. And we also got money from a Colorado foundation, the Alpamar Foundation. They gave us $20,000.
The use of state and federal tax credits is probably the most obvious incentive for upper floor redevelopment because it gives you a lot of latitude in how you would use that funding. In Colorado, we have from 25% to 35% for rural communities state tax credit, and that would be in something that would partner with the 20% federal tax credit that's currently allowed.
Banks sometimes have Community Reinvestment Act requirements that they're required to provide favorable financing that can, sometimes it's just increasing the loan to value ratio on loans to increase the money you can borrow that's paid back over a slightly longer period of time. So again, there are many different ways to fill gaps.
Every project that happens because there's an owner of a property that is willing to accept the challenge to take on getting their upper floor back into productive use. But behind them are the people that make their life easier and add the expertise. There's the professionals that you hire, but beyond that, there's the community, the Main Street director who's enthusiastic about this, the city officials that have incentives that might work with, the state programs that have incentives. So there's the financing side. And then it's really great if you've got a local contractor that's really ready to take on this kind of work, because once you get someone trained in how to do this, it's great indoor work. If you've got a climate that's got a winter season, these are great projects for the winter. So there's a lot of advantages for how to time this and make this work for development. But it all means coordination and pulling it together with your team members.
What this project has done is really served as a catalyst for us to move on to the next step, which is not to stop. We intend to develop building after building after building.
This is an exciting time. Smaller cities around the United States have figured out that upper floor loft housing is a key means to revitalizing downtown and bringing back Main Street.